Laurie Gilbertson is a dynamic, passionate, and poised communicator, whether in the courtroom, the classroom, or on television. After a successful legal career encompassing criminal prosecution, government service, media appearances, and nonprofit work, Laurie formed Tribeca Blue Consulting to bring her unique brand of enthusiasm, dedication, and skill to teaching people how to use powerful and creative presentations, public speaking, and on-camera appearances to connect with their clients and their audiences. Laurie is a former prosecutor who relished the courtroom experience and the opportunity to do justice for victims and their family when prosecuting things like homicides, organized crime, sexual assaults, and violent felony cases during her 10 years in the district attorney's office in New York City. Laurie translated that extensive trial experience into creative and comprehensive on-air TV legal analysis for both national and local media outlets. She is licensed to practice before the U.S. Supreme Court, the bars of the states of New York, Colorado, and Maryland. I'd just love to know a little more about how you ended up getting so much media opportunity, and how did you do it? How did you get it? What did you do with it?
Wow. It really started when I had moved out of the district attorney's office. So I had been there for 10 years. I had loved every minute of it. And I moved and was ready to try something different. And I was a little bored with what I was doing. And so one day on TV, I saw someone talking about criminal cases, and it was someone who I knew. And I thought, oh, that looks like fun. If she can do that, I need to find a way to do that. Because one of the best things about being a prosecutor was sitting around with people who were trying cases and just brainstorming and having so much fun talking about creative ways to do things, explaining things to each other, getting resources. And so I think it was less about being on TV and more about the fact that I just really miss talking to people about that. Sure. So I was really scrappy. I just started networking and networking and networking until I finally got a shot at Court TV. And then I went on and they liked me. And so they kept inviting me back. And then more people saw me different places and they kept on calling me back. And it just kind of snowballed from there. So that's how I got my start.
I love it. Yeah. And I love the fact that you say you're scrappy because, one of the things that we're doing with this platform is finding a different way to connect people who have an important message or who are experts with people who need great people on TV. But, prior to this, most people had to be scrappy. You have to be creative. You have to be diligent and go after it. What kind of ways did you network with people to get to that point where they finally said, hey, okay, we like this gal. We want to try her out.
Well, I wish that a network like this had been around when I was trying to get on. That would have been amazing. So it's such a fabulous resource, and something that people really need. So what I did was I started where I knew the most people. So I called the press office at the district attorney's office where I had just been, and I started asking, who do you know? Who do I need to talk to? How do I get myself on? And the press officer there put me in touch with a couple of people. And after speaking also I just started cold outreach to some legal analysts who were on TV just to say, what do you do? How'd you get started? How do I get on? And, that's a little iffy because that could be competition, but I didn't know anything. So I just did it. And eventually what I recall is that, after kind of trying all different areas of my network, I ended up in the office of this very kind of creative and interesting and unique criminal defense attorney who had been on Court TV quite a bit. And I felt like this was my audition. I had to go in and I went in, I was much more conservative than he was. He was just kind of really out there and really interesting. And I went in there and we had a discussion. I guess I passed the test because he said, okay, Laurie, I'm going to call Court TV and they're going to get you on. Nice. So you never know. You just never know. And then I prepared probably more for that first TV appearance than I have for trials because I thought this is my shot. Of course, I don't know exactly what I'm going to be asked because often when you're on TV, it's a real last minute thing. You have to really know how to think on your feet. So I had to take a couple different topics and think, what would I say? How do I want to make this visual for people? What's a good turn of phrase I can throw in there so, I sound really good and they ask me back? And I just prepared and prepared and prepared.
I think it's fantastic. Eddie was talking about this too with one of our guests, and it might have been Pavlina that we were interviewing, because I was just listening to her tape again. But he was talking about, before reaching out to people that are already doing what you're doing is a great opportunity. You have to find the right one, because if they're at a certain level, they're not going to be intimidated by you because, they're not threatened. They've got their own, success, but other ones might find you intimidating and threatening to their job. So I love the fact that you're like, I didn't know any better, so I just did it. And something in that, I think, then brings out, your honesty and just your desire to do this, not just that you're going after something.
Yeah, I always like to think of it in terms of collaboration instead of competition. And I just encourage people to think of it that way. It is a lot of pressure to put on yourself to think that you're always competing with people. And often they're just amazing ways to collaborate. And most of the people I reached out to were, very, very happy to kind of share their knowledge. And they were people who were higher up. So I was by no means any kind of, threat or competition. I do remember one appearance I did, and it was on a local channel in New York City. And I was on for quite a bit that day. And then their kind of regular legal analyst came in, and he said to me, we were talking about something. I said, we should do this segment together. We both have a lot to add. And he said to me, you should never share your airtime. It's taking away from you. You should never share your airtime. And I just kind of looked at him and said, I'm not afraid of sharing my airtime. I want to share my airtime. And that was just the exact attitude that I hated. And so I never had that moving forward. I tried really never to do that. And always, if anyone ever reached out to me, I always wanted to share what I knew, because people did it for me and it was so helpful.
Absolutely.
Well, you notice we're sharing our airtime here, and Michael's saying everything. So I understand how that goes. Well, I think I just met you, and what I'm seeing and hearing, you have a wonderful personality, wonderful on-camera appearance. So obviously you had a background legally, right, in the courts and stuff. Did you have any media training prior to that, or you were just your own personality and now you're training other people? Because I think that's what you're doing also.
You got it. You got it, Eddie. You are, you stepped in and there you go, right? With the right questions. My training was in the New York City courtrooms. My training was spending 10 years of nearly every single day, either in a courtroom, in the grand jury, or at a crime scene or a police precinct. And my training was learning to connect with people from all different ways of life and all different situations, often in incredibly emotional, difficult situations. And that's where I honed my skills. And then continuing to learn in a courtroom, for which I did get some training for, obviously legal education along the way, but trial work is so much about just doing it. It's not really theoretical, although we could sit and talk about it. You only get better when you practice, and you only get better when you do it. So my real training came from just doing it. My very first day in the district attorney's office, they handed me a folder and said, your witnesses are in the back row, counselor. Your trial starts after lunch. Oh boy. What? So, I learned by doing. And that's how I really got trained and trained myself. One of the most important things was also watching people, attorneys who I admired, attorneys who I felt they had amazing trial skills, and really going into court, watching them, talking to them, kind of accepting mentorship and trying to get that, and just really learning from how do they do the things they do? What works for them? Can I make that work for me? And just doing that. So I really didn't get any actual media training before I started doing my appearances. And then I kind of applied the same system to learning how to be on television, which was every single time someone called and asked me to be on, I went on. I don't think I ever said no in the beginning. I just kept going and going and going, and that helped me get better. Now, with training people how to do it, I just take everything that I have learned and then actually, really sat down and thought about it, right? Why do certain things work? Why are certain people persuasive or engaging? What did I do that was good? And what were those many, many mistakes that I learned from so that my clients can have the benefit of that?
Yeah, and I love the fact that you talked about, the person who said, "Hey, don't share your airtime," but you're like, "No, I want to," because not only did people help you with that, but I think there's such a sense of not only what you're willing to do to be better and be better for, the network, but also to say, "Hey, this is also still a learning situation." And if I can learn from you while we're sitting there, on TV together, I mean, I could watch you, that's great, but I can have even more opportunity to learn if we're dialoguing together and we're both getting coverage.
It makes so much sense. And, when I started out, I did a lot of time on court TV. So court TV in those days would have people on and you'd be there for about 4 hours. I mean, that's a long TV appearance. And you'd sit and you'd watch the trial and then you'd talk about it. And some of the best things I learned then weren't necessarily seen on air. They were the conversations I was able to have with the hosts in between. And they were just, so giving of their expertise and their insight. When I first started, the very first person I was on with, I asked her, how did I do? Was that okay? And she, said, you did great. You did great. And then each time we'd go on, I say, okay, now can you give me a little more feedback? And she did. And they all did. And, I think those are the people you want to search out. Those are the people who are going to not only share their airtime, but share their expertise. And you'll be able to learn. And those are the people who are fun to be on with, right? I mean, those are the people that, you want to be a giving person. And producers, when you are pitching to be on and when you're coming on, they don't really, they're always fine if you kind of, slide right in, do your appearance, it's great, and you leave. But what if you can send them some talking points beforehand? What if you can follow up afterwards with some more talking points or thoughts on other segments? What if you can even, and this goes to sharing airtime, what if you can suggest another expert for them? So their booking agent doesn't have to look up 10 people and they can call them right away. How can you make someone else's life easier? And so that's what I tried to do too.
Okay, you're hired.
I accept.
That's it. Interview's over. You're hired. You're an expert.
Yes. What do you have to say that's going to be relevant? You have to, before you even think about being able to get on there and get on camera, do you have something to say that actually relates to what the segment is about, what's going on in the news, any kinds of things that might be on the air to give you that opportunity. So that would be my first suggestion. When I started out, there were so many legal cases in the news, and often I would see something and think, okay, do I have something to add? And if I had something to add, I'd send a pitch. Like, I'd love to be on and talk about this. So if you are an expert, right now the world is in turmoil. Are you an expert on Ukraine? Do you speak various languages? Can you give something that maybe other people don't have? Just pitch, call, send an email and say, this is what I have. I want to come on and share it. And it's all about sharing and educating. And, that's how you make yourself newsworthy. That's how you start getting out there. You start providing something that maybe a lot of people can't provide, or they can't provide in the way that you can. Once you are there, what do you do? Right? And there's so much involved in it. I'm sure you've gotten amazing advice from all the people you've interviewed. But I like to think of it as, you want to say something you short. Okay. You don't want to be super talky. You don't want them cutting you off and straying off. You want to be entertaining. And you may be talking about a very serious topic. I was often talking about very serious topics, but how could I make it entertaining and educational? How could I use a good turn of phrase that would stick in someone's ears? How could I use a good analogy I may have thought of that makes it entertaining? So that's the second. And you need to be relevant. Don't forget why they have you. You're not on there to showcase your expertise and talk about how great you are. You're on there to talk to the audience, provide something of value so that they keep watching and they want to learn more.
We have chatted with a lot of other experts, and they gave their advice on pitching. So I'm curious, when you send an email pitch, how does your email pitch look? What do you put in the subject line? How long is the email? Just curious.
Once again, the same things you want to do on the air are the same things you want to do in the pitch. Short, entertaining, and relevant. So if I were to put out a pitch today on a particular topic, I'd probably put the case name or the topic, whatever trial it was I wanted to talk about, in the headline, expert on X.
All right.
And then in the pitch, do you need someone to come in and talk about trial X? I've been watching some of the coverage. Here are 3 things that really stick out to me.
Yep.
I am a 10-year prosecutor, and I've been in the media for many years. I'd be happy to appear on your show. Here's my contact information.
Perfect.
That's how I do it. Just boom, boom, boom.
Perfect.
Right? People don't have a lot of time to read through those things. You want to get them, catch them right away. And it also gives them a taste of how you're going to be on air.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
An email that's this long that no one wants to read, they're just going to be done. Like, that person probably wouldn't be presenting well on air because they weren't able to make it shorter. They weren't able to really get concise. So use that touch point as a way to show yourself and what you can do. Even if you're not sending a reel, even if you're just starting out and you don't have a reel, you don't even have headshots, you don't have anything, you can showcase yourself in that touch point and just do it.
Yeah, that's a really good point about, I didn't even think of it that way, that what you're showing of yourself in your email, the way it's written, how it's written, is a direct correlation to how you're going to show up on air. But also the point that, going back to talking about relevance, which a lot of people have been talking about, which is really important, is that just because you have something you want to talk about doesn't mean anybody's going to find it interesting unless it is relevant or interesting enough to grab somebody's attention. And if it's not, you can write the best email in the world and people are going to say, yeah, that's great. Yeah, maybe when we have, a free moment of airspace, which will be never. So making sure you're trying to follow what else is going on and be a part of that also shows that you're paying attention. I like how you said, I've been watching your coverage of this case. Here's a few other things I can add to it. Also proves that you care about what they're trying to accomplish.
Right. It goes to, are they missing something? Is there a hole there? And can you fill that with your expertise? And then to go back, Michael, to what you were saying about, the email is kind of a touch point to show what you can do. I really believe that every single interaction and communication you have when you are pitching to get yourself on, and then when you're actually on, is so important in establishing who you are to work with. If you are fortunate enough that you get to go in, they're going to do your hair and makeup and make you look all nice. You don't have to do it at home and you get that luxury. How are you with the hair and makeup people?
Yep.
What kinds of, gosh, I got the best makeup tips when I was going on. I learned so much, but, are you making conversation? Are you learning? If the host of the show or the person who's interviewing comes in and they are obviously rushed and they just want to say, hi, nice to meet you, happy to have you, and then go out, don't try to get into an involved conversation, right? Read the room and just be an easy guest. I mean, every single thing, because I think you may have had some specialty people, and I'm sure that the hair and makeup people know more about everything going on than anyone else.
Here's some stories.
Yeah. So who do you want to be pushing you? You want everyone to be an advocate for you and an ally for you. So those things start from the second, I used to get picked up in a car. It was a lovely luxury when we were doing things in person. How are you with the driver? What kind of conversation are you making? Are you on time? Are you ready? Do you keep people waiting? I mean, people remember these things. And that's all before you even get to the fun part of, how am I going to present myself? That's a whole, that's an important part, hugely important, but all these other things are too, to kind of longevity in the media.
it's important as a person, and you're teaching everybody who's watching that it's important as a person to treat others nicely at every single level, and that will come out on the air also, you know.
And isn't that crazy that we even have to say that that it's even necessary to say that? But but it is. It's important to remember.
You know what's interesting? I work at Morning America, so I see interviews all the time, and then I listen to podcasts and I watch other shows. And the past few years, whenever there's a guest, at the very end, when the host says thank you, the guest says thank you. And it's like, I was raised by saying you're welcome. And I think maybe once in 3 years I heard somebody say you're welcome. So if anybody's out there and you're an expert on TV, please say you're welcome.
And if you say you're welcome, Eddie's going to invite you back.
That's it.
That's really funny. I never thought of that because somebody says thank you, and you're like, well, thank you. No, thank you.
I'm going to have to think about that because I do podcasts now, and I'm going to have to think about that as, right, Michael? I'm trying to remember at the end of our conversation, because I think by then it was thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Right? I don't remember, but I'm going to have to watch out for that.
And as a stage manager, a lot of times we're working with the audience, so we're working with other people, and there are times that we give gifts or we do handouts, it's called, whatever. And I tell the audience, I say, the camera's going to be here. When I cue you, you're going to get it, and you're going to say thank you, because the children are watching and they need to learn manners. And they said, okay, thank you.
Eddie, I don't know if you know the book, Everything I Ever Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten.
No,
do you know that book?
No.
Oh, I'm going to have to look that up and send you the link. But it's all about that, learning to say please and thank you, being, sharing your toys, being considerate of people. One of my favorites, taking a nap in the afternoon. Don't really get to do that anymore, but it is lovely. It's just kind of all back to those basics. It doesn't have to be complicated. A lot of this is relationships. What relationships are you forming? Because those are that's the most important part. You can have the greatest pitch in the world, but if you have a relationship with someone who then has a relationship with someone else who can then get you to the right person because you have cultivated that, and because you treat them well and respect them and are open to collaboration, then you're going to get in front of the right people. And so it's a lot about that.
I can't believe you've never read that, Eddie. It's beautiful. It's all about the simple things that make the biggest differences.
I love that. Yeah.
I think it also tells us to wash our hands. Would have been good
probably does.
I just wondered if you had any last thoughts. We also are anticipating that a lot of people who are getting into media, like as their career, are going to be taking, a look at this, being a part of this conference as well. So since you've seen so many people on the other side, the people that are working and interacting and, working for the networks and, hosting shows and anchoring, any thoughts for people who really want to build this into their career plan, how to approach what they do in the world of media to not only get seen and heard, but to, maybe climb their media corporate ladder?
Well, I think you touched on this when we first got started, which was kind of about bringing your expertise and becoming an expert. And I would really encourage people to be really mindful about that. What is your expertise and how can you support it? What can you continue to learn about that's going to make you an even better host when you're on the air, an even better guest when you're on the air? It's not just about delivery. It's not just about knowing where to look, right at the camera, knowing whether you put your hands up or you keep them down. Those things you can learn, but being able to come across with some substantive content behind you as either a host or a guest is so crucial. So to be really mindful about that, to understand that learning and building your expertise isn't just what you learn at your job. It's all these other opportunities. Like Eddie, I'm sure, is an expert in lots of things from listening to lots of podcasts, but you can learn from podcasts. You can learn on YouTube. You can take a course, read books, talk to people who are doing what you want to be doing, and learn that way too. And also understand that it is a long game. This is, it was 10 years before I even felt slightly qualified to put myself out as an expert, to do anything. Hopefully, other people feel that maybe they can do that a little earlier, but I was building my career then. So it really wasn't until then that the opportunities kind of came up and that I felt it was the right time. But, you really need to own that content, own your expertise, whatever it is in. Don't diminish it in any way. If you know something more than a lot of people who are watching, then you're an expert and they need to hear from you. So I also think a great guest or a great host in media, is someone who is able to take all of those complicated concepts and make them simpler and easily digestible, and makes people want to learn more and understand more about it. So you're not just someone who is going on to talk, you're someone who's going on to educate. And I'd really encourage people to think about it that way as they try to kind of come up in their careers, because people will notice that. The people you're pitching, the people you're working with, they're going to know about, what content is behind your delivery. And so growing that expertise and being super mindful about that niche you are going into, I think would be a really, really positive thing for people going into media in either side or way, as a host, as a guest, behind the camera, wherever they want to be.
All I know is I still want to have a career in like the Food Network, and all I want to do is go to places and eat and then talk about it.
That's our next conference, you and me.
That's our next conference. Let's do it, Eddie.